without further ado, I'll give the word to Roman. So, Roman, please.
Hi to everybody. So, yes, I'm from Moscow, and Russia is one of the best places to investigate money laundering because there is so much money laundering actually going on in Russia, and I'm quite happy, to live in this place because there is plenty of things to do. So, and Paul is right. It's one of the most difficult crimes, not even for journalists, but for law enforcement as well, because, as you know, law enforcement does not investigate money laundering itself. It investigates crimes, the first crime, so-called predicates, and then only the money laundering. So money laundering is always the second crime. And that is why journalists have more and more possibilities, because sometimes we don't care about predicates. So we see that there are signs of money laundering, and we go after it. The thing is that we'll talk today, as Paul mentioned, about one of the biggest money laundering scheme, which was actually investigated by OCCRP for the first time. And I would say that, after OCCRP article, the law enforcement came in. And now there is a criminal case in Russia, and actually Russian authorities are trying, to deal with us. They're trying to ask us to help them, but we are not willing to do that, actually, at this stage, until they give everything they have to us. This is a unique case, not only because of volumes, which is 20 billion, but also because of the techniques they used. So during the last 5 or, 10 years, we got enough knowledge how money laundering is working, and we were able to identify it and to prove that this is money laundering, because the techniques were almost the same. But these guys, in 2010, invented something brand new, something we have never met before. So what actually happened? Before that, money laundering was about fake contracts. So companies send money to companies, and the contracts are always fake. And let us say if it comes to Russia, it was very easy to identify whether the contract is fake or not when it came to, sending money abroad. Because we just checked it with the customs servers, and if we could prove that the goods did not enter the country, then we could prove that this is money laundering. It was very easy, and it was easy for the banks as well. And guys understood it. And what they did, they invented a brand new scheme, which we called Laundromat, and they understood that the best thing that the best purpose for any payment is actually a court decision. So they asked themselves, okay, what is the best purpose that law enforcement would never argue? And the answer is the court decision. And that is why they found a territory of a poor country where judges are very cheap. This was Moldova. I think that 2 or 3 years ago, our colleagues from Moldova, they noticed that, judges are issuing court orders one after another on huge amounts of money, like on $500 million, $800 million. And when we looked into those court orders, we understood that, something is wrong here, because the companies which were suing and the companies which were getting money, they were complete fake. UK shell companies with zero balances, with no turnover, with nothing. And simultaneously, they were asking for $500 million. This was like the biggest court decisions. The biggest promissory notes probably in the history of the world. So the whole thing started with this kind of promissory notes. When one offshore company issued a note, and another offshore company bought it. But here was the strange thing. Look at the promissory notes and look at the names of the companies. The thing is that this paper on $500 million is completely fake, because the names of the companies are different. They skip one letter. The names of the directors are different. They skip another letter. But despite that fact, Moldovan judges, they're issuing decisions without even noticing, this kind of mistakes. Another important point was that, you can ask, but these are agreements between 2 offshore companies. Why would they go to a Moldovan court? But the guys were very clever. What they did, they inserted so-called grantors. So each bill was secured by a person from Moldova. Usually from a very poor person from, living somewhere, in the village. And this guy was saying that if the company can't pay $500 million, then I'll pay it. Which was, of course, bullshit, and Another bullshit was that when the court happened, the guy went to the court and said, yes, I mean, I admit that, I secured the bill, but I don't have money, I can't pay it. And another important thing, each bill was also was also secured by a number of Russian companies. And this is very important because when it came to the court and court ordered to pay these sums, the money went from Russia. So actually the whole scheme was invented just to get money from Russia and then place it in Europe with the strongest proof so that the law enforcement could not say anything against it. And actually this is a big problem because we discussed it with investigators in Russia who are now investigating the case. They said that we understand that everything is fake. We understand that the money is dirty. We understand that this is money laundering. But when it comes to charges, the guys always show us the court order, saying that there was nothing we could do because it was ordered by the court. It's very important that $20 billion, and actually we have now plenty of proofs and sources that this money belonged to the state. So this is not something, this is not tax evasion, this is not, gray import schemes or export schemes. This is something which was stolen from the population of Russia and actually stolen from me. We've got plenty of sources saying that this money actually goes from the Sochi Olympic Games, from the state contracts, and so on and so forth. So we've got there were 20 Russian banks involved in the whole case. And of course, our idea was to check every bank. Since I've been investigating money laundering, for the last 5 years, the majority of the banks I knew. So I knew that these guys are the biggest money launderers in Russia. But one of them was very interesting. I've never, this is how, this is our infographic, so how we see how the scheme actually worked. From the promissory note to Moldovan court, then to Russian companies, and the money goes from Russia. We were looking into the banks, and the bank which made the biggest transactions was called Ruski Zemelny Bank, or the Russian Land Bank. It was controlled by a person whose name is Grigoriev, and what is important is that one of the shareholders of the bank was the relative of the president Vladimir Putin. So the name of the guy was Igor Putin, and he's the cousin of our president. This bank, not only this one, but there was actually another one as well, so the guy controlled two banks. In general, they wired more than 200 billion rubles in dirty money, which was about $7 or $6 billion. $7 billion. And then I'll give the word to Miranda. She will actually continue, with the thing which happened after the money was placed in Europe and how Grigoriev invested this stolen money. But just to sublime the importance of the job we did, just before coming here to Lillehammer, we had a kind of a close meeting with the Central Bank of Russia, with the person who is in charge of money laundering unit. And we discussed this scheme with the central bank and how we can combat it, because how we can fight it. Because if you find a corrupt judge somewhere in Papua New Guinea or whatever, in any other country, and he issues an order, it's very difficult to fight it. And actually, after our story, the central bank found the Central Bank of Russia found some instruments. They didn't tell us what kind of instruments, but they said that these kind of schemes are not possible anymore in Russia, And they were very grateful, to OCCRP that nobody will use it anymore. But simultaneously they said that, now they are doing something different. They are now buying securities. But I'm quite sure that, we'll find a way to investigate it as well and close it, in a couple of months.
That's very cool, yeah. The other thing, to add to what Roman was saying is that in all there were 19 banks. So the Russian Land Bank, was one of the most important. So most of the money went through this bank, but there were other 18 banks. One of them is the first Czech Russian bank. This is the bank that, was at the center of quite big scandal in Europe, in France, because the National Front of Marine Le Pen received a loan from this same bank. And this being said, we don't know, I mean, we actually know that the money went to the EU, that's for sure, because they all went to a Latvian bank, one single Latvian bank, the whole 20 billion. But we don't know where majority of the money went, so we don't know how they got used, except for some amounts that Miranda will indicate right now.
So the whole point of money laundering is to take illegal money and make it legal by opening up a business, buying a real estate, and so on. And this is exactly what happened. You know, we had one small trail that led us to find out what happened. In this case, it was Montenegro. And you know, the whole operation was Russia, Moldova, UK, and suddenly you have Montenegro as a country where they're buying the real estate. Okay. We've been having trouble with the computer for some reason. It just doesn't react. You see everything I have on my desktop.
All your secrets and the Q&A.
Guy. NSA is watching. It's live on television. Okay. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. So what we found out is there was one transaction. It was $11.8 million. And what happened is that money ended up in the tender in Serbia for the privatization of a resort in Montenegro. Okay. How did you do it? Okay. And this was a luxurious old hotel that was placed in this like really nice area with the old trees and untouched nature and a beautiful beach. And his goal wasn't to operate this business himself. This was not the point of why he was buying it. He actually intended to sell this resort or to make a partnership with Kempinski, which is the international chain, and turn this into internationally recognized five-star resort in Montenegro. And you see that he started with dirty money, which ended up in Montenegro and was laundered this way by buying a property. But in the end, it would be a legitimate business, hotel business, owned by him and operated by Kempinski. And this is not the only time. We're going to just talk a little bit about, and yeah, there was another interesting thing here, is that we found that there was a lot of instances where they were borrowing money to other businesses. So, for example, Grigoriev lended some of the money to a tennis club. And anybody in tennis club had no idea, you know, where did they get the money from or why did they get the money from or when they're going to pay it. But the purpose of that was to say, if anybody comes and asks, how did you buy something, where does this money come from? Is to say, well, I got the money from this tennis club. So you kind of have a legitimate source of money that was illegitimately acquired. I'll just give you a short definition of money laundering because this is a topic of what we are talking about. And it's really money that is derived from a legal activity. And it goes through a process of changing hands and kind of washing it out to become legitimate and legal. Okay, it kind of squeezes the origin of the money and makes it legitimate for the future use. These are some of the players involved, and Roman was mentioning banks, but also very often it's laundered through different cash-intensive businesses, from insurance companies and so on. There's many, many players in the circle. And this is how it goes. You have a legal activity. You have to place the money into the bank. And it's usually the most problematic part of the whole cycle. Because if you're cocaine smuggling ring, and you have a lot of bills, of $10, how do you, you cannot bring a suitcase with the $1 million into the bank and say, oh, I want this placed on this account. So you have to come up with a really clever scheme, and I'm going to talk about a few of them, how you launder it. And then there's a process of layering, which is what they were talking about, moving money from many different accounts. And then finally, integration, which is penning the money into a real estate, which is the whole purpose. You want to buy something. This is another scheme of what it looks like. So the placement of the money is basically you have to physically put the money onto bank account, either by depositing it or changing the currency into the checks, or exchanging the small bills for large bills and then physically carrying them, or even smuggling the cash out of the country. The problem with today's world and why people are coming up with such a clever schemes, like in case of Russia, is because all the banks have a reporting obligation. So if you come to the bank with 1 million and you have no paperwork to show you where you got it, they're supposed to call the money laundering investigative unit, and they should pay attention to this and check the transactions. So you need to be really clever to make sure the banks do it, or you have to own a bank. And we've seen that very often, that organized crime figures, very corrupt politicians actually own the bank. So this way they make the transfers. There are few methods of laundering. One of them is structuring, which is basically you come for days after days and you just place small amounts of money onto a bank account. Okay. Other one is you smuggle cash. There was a very interesting case recently in Latvia where a railway company official went to Lithuania, received a bribe, and then took all the money and tried to cross the border and was stopped by the police with a trunk full of cash. That was very stupid, but people tend to do it. We know there were many cases of businessmen who would be caught crossing the border of another country with a lot of money at hand. You'll see very often that all of the, like hotels, the reason why they use it because those are cash-intensive businesses. Very often the organized crime figures will own cafes. They're going to own gambling parlors. They're going to own exchange places and so on, because it's very easy to conceal the illegal money with the legal money and mix it up and report it all as legal income. Very often you'll see that it's called trade-based laundering, which basically means that I under-invoice you or over-invoice you and then give you the rest of the money in cash. And this way you appear as you have spent, for example, less, but you laundered your money for the services. We talked in the last session about the shelf companies, how they're used. And the problem with shelf companies is that if you want to make a transfer of whatever amount of money from your account, and it's significant, you actually have to give a paperwork. So very often we see that in transactions, it's going to say, for transportation services, according to contract of this number and of this date. Or it's going to say, according to agreement on purchase of this and that. So there's always going to be some kind of paperwork, which is why they set up all these companies and basically have a cover for the illegal transfers. Banks, a very typical way, the first family of Montenegro, they owned a bank. And they actually placed all the government money into the banks. And then all the bad businessmen, some of the crime figures, went and set up offshore companies or local companies. And all these companies were getting like 5 million euros loans. In a country where, it's a small salary, it's a significant amount of money. It's not like in Russia where you would have to do the billions. And then those companies were never paying back. But all these people had a legal cover of where the money came from. It came from the bank. Another thing is real estate. Very often you'll see people buying real estate. And sometimes they buy it very cheaply, but they pay the rest of the money in cash. The reason why I was mentioning some of these things is because if you're investigating money laundering, you cannot see if somebody is putting a small deposit into the bank unless you actually acquire bank statements, and then you can see it. But that's why you can follow where they spend the money. So you can see how did they buy a property and where did the money come from. Was it paid in cash? What did it come from a transaction? Sometimes the company that pays the money for the property will be different of the company who purchased the money. And usually those records are, for example, available in the land registry as an evidence of the proof. So, just quickly.
And just to add to what Miranda was saying. So first of all, she mentioned Kempinski, that Kempinski was about to enter this deal with Grigoriev, with this banker that was connected to Putin's cousin. Kempinski backed off this deal after our reporting, so that was a good outcome. The bank in Latvia that received the 20 billion lost their Moody's rating. So what I'm saying here is, even if we investigated before the law enforcement did, there are some outcomes. So we don't always have to wait for the law enforcement to step in and start the official investigation, which will take years and all that. Because if you expose money laundering and the criminals, in a way that is explanatory and with documents attached, that will affect their business greatly. They won't be able to do business as usual. And I think both Miranda and Roman, before we go to to Bitcoin and to cryptocurrencies and cyber money laundering, can you tell a little bit about the process? I mean, how did you get the data, that enabled you to find Grigoriev in Montenegro? Just a few details, technical details, And maybe Roman, just talk a little bit about how you got the company records of the banks in Russia.
I think it's that one is working. So when it comes to money laundering, this is also very difficult. I mean, the most difficult thing is that the main document is the banking statement. So, I mean, the banking statement for each financial reporter is a kind of dream. So it's so difficult to get them. And in our case, we had very good sources. I mean, OCCRP had very good sources in Moldova, and that's where we got the banking statement, so we could see which companies wired money to whom and so on. Now we have very good sources in Russia as well, and we are getting them. But as for shareholding structures and so on, Russian banks are quite open in Russia. They're probably one of, in terms of getting the shareholders, getting the financial reports, Russian banks are obliged to name all of their shareholders up to the end, even if the shareholder is the offshore company. Then in the annual report, the bank is obliged to say who is the beneficial owner of the company. So which was, very easy, actually.
For Montenegro, we basically started with the name of the company in transactions. But what it meant for me, we didn't know that they actually invested in Montenegro. We did a simple thing, which everybody does. We went and Googled. And we found out, and literally it was like that, and we found out that there was in local language a piece of paper saying that this company applied on the tender and that they want this tender to buy this property. And then from there, we went on to first figure out what the tender was and get the details of the price of the tender and how it was. The price was lower and lower till finally this company purchased it. And then the next thing was to figure out where the hotel is. And once we knew municipality in Montenegro, we were able to get all the land records. And the land records had the original contract on the sale. They had all the supporting documents on the purchase. And then another interesting thing at the end of the investigation, when we already had most of the information, we actually called the company. And I had a really funny conversation with them because I asked, I would like to speak with Alexander Grigoriev, who is the shareholder of your company. And they said, we don't know about this person. We've never heard of it. I was like, how did you not hear about the person who actually owns your business? And they were, no, we don't know about it. And then I called again. And this time a different lady answered, and they said, well, I have to check with the boss if you can get in touch with him. I was like, okay, good. And then I called again, and then it was again a different story that, he's not really a shareholder, but I should talk to a lawyer. And then I called a lawyer, and the lawyer said, where are you going to sue you if you publish anything? But it kept going. But the really good thing is at some point lawyer got really reckless and he started talking about the details of the deal that I had no idea about. Because he just assumed I know far more than I was telling. So he actually gave us a lot more details. And I wanted to say, it's really interesting, the prosecutor is a really great source of information. Because what happens is very often they'll get all the bank statements. I mean, in almost all of the investigation, they're going to get, they're going to go seize the bank account and get the printouts of all the transactions. But what happens is it's really difficult to analyze these transactions. I mean, it's usually, if you're talking about a lot of money, it's going to be hundreds of pages of transactions. And then you have another problem, which is many of these companies will be offshore. And the prosecutor will just not say, we had enough evidence to nail this person. We don't care what happened abroad. We're not going to go after these companies. Or they'll find out that the money actually came from Moldova, but, they're going to say, well, I don't want to be bothered with Moldova. I'll just do my part of the investigation. I'm going to sentence this person, and that's where it ends. But if you as a journalist go and you ask them to share this information with you, And, as with every source, many of them will actually help you out and give you information and share them with you. Then you can go and analyze it. And that's what I've been doing with all of my investigations. And Roman and Paul have been doing with the investigation they've been working on. We would either work with programmers to help us analyze the data, or in one case, one of the stories was about Gulnara Karimova and the $1 billion bribe. And in that case, we actually got the bank statements from her account from a source. And I spent, because they were in 3 different languages, and there was no way to import all the data in Excel sheet to analyze it. So I basically sat and typed all the transactions, and in the end I was able to see, oh wow, there was $1 billion that came into her account, and these are the companies that pay the most, and this is what she was getting money for most often. And then we went and checked every single company. So this is what you do. I mean, if you go after the bank records, and once you have the bank records, you go and after the companies. There's a question.
And sometimes, just to add to this, sometimes the bank records are not, with these sources inside banks. Sometimes they're attached to court cases.
Yeah.
So we started one of our largest investigations in the past years, from a banking record that detailed 2 years worth of transactions in the bank account of this ghost company, that was laundering money for various mafia groups, various criminal groups, the Vietnamese criminal groups, Chinese organized crime, Russian and Romanian and all that. And all that was attached to a court case that the police in Moldova was investigating, but they were investigating one line from that banking statement, because someone, just sued someone else for this transaction because he sent the money to this bank account and never got the goods back. So, but when they subpoena the banking records, they don't subpoena just one transaction. They subpoena all the records, and they're on file, accessible.
Yeah, and you really, as a journalist, you need to be. There's a very big fear among the journalists. Like you mentioned, bank records is like, there is no chance to get.
Okay, just not to create chaos here. So we'll just take your question because you raised your hand already, and we won't take any questions until Leo finishes his presentation about cryptocurrency.
Okay, so you guys just mentioned a while ago the court documents sometimes have bank records, and I know, Marina, you just mentioned a while ago that sometimes it's a source that will get the bank records for you. Let us say, I'm just trying to figure out legality and ethics when it comes to asking, let us say, a police officer to get those records for you. What's the general guidance on something like that, and who is that potential source that will help you to get those banking records, because sometimes those records are so key to every investigation?
Well, my point is that everything is ethical if it comes to truth. So I don't care who gave me the record. Actually, if it is a true record, then I'll take it. And we deal with both, groups, with criminals and law enforcement, and we take records from both of them, and we don't care, actually. The thing is that we should just check whether they're true or not. And if they are, then we use them.
No, but do you ever ask the police officer to get your records? That's what I'm asking.
We can't tell you who we're asking, whom we're asking, because that's, you don't reveal your sources.
But look,
potentially banking records, are accessed by large categories of people, from the banking, like the clerk in the bank, to the, to the central bank of the country that has access to the banking data of, the other banks, to, the intelligence agency, to the police, to the financial unit in the Ministry of Finances. So there are many, many people that have access to this. And we analyze who can give us access. So it's not just the police, it's many others that are potential sources.
Look, what usually happens is that we even don't ask them. They give them to us because, after you publish stories and the guys, they are keen on, let us say, just unlimited, as Miranda said, unlimited figures. And they have these like hundreds and hundreds of pages of different transactions. They don't care about them, and they don't have enough time and staff to actually do that. And you know what? They are living in 20th century. They don't have even enough tools to structure the data, and we do have them. And they are people who are fighting for the truth as well. Some of them. And the idea is that if we can't do that, then the truth will die. So take the whole thing and make the best investigation. That's how it usually
okay,
works.
so let's stop here. We'll continue the discussion afterwards, and let's have Leo Reitano presenting the new money laundering, the new techniques, cryptocurrencies and such.
Sorry. We need to move the computer. Let's hope everything works. Yeah.
So this is a very tricky area, right? I mean, Bitcoin and other types of cryptocurrencies. You probably heard about the Silk Road case, and we all have this idea that, not all of us, but some of us have this idea that cryptocurrencies mean crime, and that's not always accurate. But let's hear, Leo's point of view on this.
I hope I may be able to solve, there's a problem. No, it's okay. Just Stefan.
In the meantime, maybe you can.
Yeah, should works. Okay.
Wunderbar.
Okay, basically we will talk about the new dimension of money laundering, which is called cyber laundering. Of course, you know already what is money laundering, so it's a way to disguise money coming from criminal activities. This money can come from several kinds of crimes: drug trafficking, human trafficking, mass trafficking, terrorism, organized crime. So there is a huge tons of different kind of criminal activities that need the money laundering. So money laundering is a circle. It's like the one ring, take them all. Okay. Of course, the traditions, as already explained by Miranda Roman. So banks are usually used for money laundering activities, and once the money is laundered, it can be used for several operations. So there was few banks in the past. In 1991 was the BCCI in, I believe, in Pakistan, if I remember properly, which was used by several Secret Service agencies for black operation. So when you need to make a black operation, which means an operation which is not authorized by the government, you need funds. These funds you cannot ask the government. So you need a bank that give you money to do this kind of operation. So it's not only organized crime that runs this kind of activities, but there are many players around the world. Of course, the HSBC case, because, is very famous. You have a list of billions, billions of dollars, which is credited for money laundering activity to several banks. So the phenomenon is quite huge and vast. Obviously, talking about cyber laundering, Internet does not produce new schemes of money laundering. Already Miranda explained, the placement, the layering, and the integration stage. But it produces a new way, to, implement the money laundering cycle. Okay? This is kind of scheme that has been done by one of the few good work I ever read about cyber laundering. Simona Mulirali, she's an analyst for Pricewaterhouse. She wrote in 2006, quite before Bitcoin cyber laundering, but the scheme still works. So in the orange you have the traditional cycle. In pink one is the cyber laundering. So in the case of traditional, you have the cash. You need to insert this into a bank. Okay. In many cases in cyber laundering, the money is already dematerialized. So it's already digital currency or cryptocurrency. So you don't need this phase, which is the most dangerous phase stage for money laundering. So that's clearly a technical advantage in comparison with the old-fashioned way to do money laundering. Of course, the layering is labor-intensive and requires a lot of work. So you need a lot of people works, to make the layering stage in the traditional approach. In the internet, it just can go by through few clicks. So, just using certain software or just using certain bank account, as we will see in the next slides, is possible to do in a very easy way this operation. as integration. For example, I can open, several accounts in other banks or using other, Bitcoin wallet if I need to, integrate this money. And if I need to cash it out, I can use money mules. So again, placement in certain cases is not needed in the cyber laundering activities. So we have, let's say, one stage less than traditional cycle. One of the most common activity for cyber laundering is online gambling. So we have it's like a business about 39 billions by 2016. And there was a report from McAfee that said that there are many illegal online gambling websites where you can go, you of course put a lot of money, you just, play a bit, and then you have your money washed out and you can use for legal activity, as in normal casino. So you deposit 1 million euro in a casino, play a bit, and then you cash out with the money which is clean. Okay, same stuff, but much easier, much quicker. As you understand, just a few clicks of the mouse, you can deposit your money from a credit card to online gambling. So it's really much quicker and easier to do. And there is another aspect. You can, if you have, for example, you're able to use, counterfeited credit card, you can even switch your identity. If you use proxy like Tor or the other, anonymizer tools, you can, hide your identity and hide your position. So you can be completely anonymous. On the contrary, when you go to a bank, if you don't have a proxy person, but the proxy person can conduct to you, so, it's always a risk. In this case, you don't have this problem. So if you're good technically, you can do it with less risk than traditional way. Oh, the Karabakh attack was an attack made by a Russian cyber gang. Has nothing to do with money laundering for what they did. They just, hacked a bank and cash out the money by using the ATM. What is important for cyber laundering is that the same techniques can be used to cash out money, for example, by Bitcoin wallet. So if I have a huge amount of money in a Bitcoin wallet, I can, organize money mules, as the gang did, across Europe or across the world, and they can go and lock a Bitcoin, and cash out all this Bitcoin, by using several wallets. So it is possible to, do the same stuff in the cyber realm by using this kind of approach. So that was the scheme, so the cyber criminal just breached the account, and just all the money has been cashed out at certain hours where the people, were expecting the money. So without even needing the bankomat. Another way to do cyber laundering was e-gold, what is called e-gold. So Liberty Reserve was the most famous provider of digital cash. And it was active until 2012, we believe, when it was shut down by a police operation. And basically, you can go to you can go to a website like this, buy certain kind of currency by using your normal credit card or PayPal. But this currency doesn't keep records of who you are. So you can use this e-gold or e-digital currency to buy whatever you like, and no one can track you back. It was involved in a very huge, let's say, cyber laundering activities, about 6 billion. So I'm, stressing this aspect because people believe that cyber laundering is just about little money or pocket money. Well, it was not. So it was a very huge amount of money. This company was based in Costa Rica. It was a centralized digital currency. This is an important aspect. So there was an entity, a business entity, and there was two persons, of course, in charge of the company. They were indicted, trial, and they're just, waiting for sentence. But it was like a digital bank, even if it wasn't a bank, legally speaking. So this was the scheme. So I have, cash or a check or, my bank account, credit card. I just go to the exchanger. So the exchange convert money received from bank wire into Liberty Reserve funds. When you have Liberty Reserve funds, you are anonymous. So no one knows when you buy something where this money is coming from. Okay? So as in every anonymous process, you need a point where, you cut the ties. You cut the links with your previous identity. So no one knows who you are. Okay? Okay, there was a multi-year investigation. So US prosecutors filed a case against Liberty Reserve. And they say it was like a black market bank. So it was used for money laundering, even for computer hacking, child pornography, and narcotics trafficking. Okay? So the cyber laundering was real even before Bitcoin. And this is important to highlight because it wasn't that anonymous as Bitcoin may be. So if Bitcoin is not centralized, if there is no central authority, if there is no person in charge, in the future, the phenomenon could even get worse. Okay. Another way, to do cyber laundering is the dark markets. I don't know how many of you have been to, the Tor hidden services. So I don't know, the Hidden Wiki, or all these sites in the dark market where you can buy drugs, weapons, or whatever you like. You have, commercial services of Hidden Wiki. You can see.
I'm actually curious, how many of you are using Tor?
Okay. So you can see, you can buy hacker services, or you can buy, you can even contract a killer. They say so. I mean, for me, it's a scam. Yeah, but okay. Oh, guns or a fake passport, whatever you like. All this money, the currency of the dark market is the Bitcoin. So when you go to these sites, you use Bitcoin. So that's proof that Bitcoin is already massively used for criminal activities. It is an evidence that it's very easy to achieve. You go to the Hidden Wiki, now you have a Bitcoin wallet, you pay by using Bitcoins. Credit cards, PayPal, other wire accounts, wire transfer are not allowed. Okay? So why they use Bitcoin if they are so safe? Okay? That's one of the points. Of course, Bitcoin is the most important cryptocurrency, but it's not the only one. There is a huge family of crypto coins that can be used, but they are only used by professionals. Okay, so what is Bitcoin? Now we are going to face certain technicalities, so I have to be able to explain in a very elementary way. But it is a digital payment network. It was conceived in 2009 by, let's say, an anonymous identity, which they call Satoshi Nakamoto, but I mean, it's just a nickname, so no one knows who invented really the Bitcoin. So it's anonymous from the beginning, so you know who invented it. It works like, let's say, a peer-to-peer network. Okay, so you have a huge tons of computer mining or making calculation in order to allow the transaction between, the digital currency. This is the traditional, e-commerce activity. So you see they were called order, okay, and you go to the bank, the retailer, and so forth. Bitcoin, is decentralized, so there is no central authority. Like peer-to-peer, you can buy Bitcoin from everybody, and you can sell Bitcoin to everybody, okay? How huge is the, growth of Bitcoin? You can see this is the trend. It started in 2009, and you can see what is the level it reached in 2015, okay? Okay, how Bitcoin works technically. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the PGP or GPG, okay?
How many?
How many? Okay, pretty much everybody. So it works pretty much the same. It's asymmetric cryptography, so you have a private key, a public key, and then you use private key to, make a signature of the public key and to be recognized as the owner of the public key, okay? Private key, so, is the most important element, so because it proves the ownership of Bitcoin value. So if you lose, for certain reason, your private key, you will lose everything, okay? There is no way to receive back this money. Okay, is a number, the private key is a number of 256 bit. It's random. It's generated by when you open a wallet. So when you go to a wallet website or wallet client, it will generate as a GPG client, a private key and the public key. Use the public key for transaction and the private key to be able to prove that you are the owner of this kind of money. Okay. The owner of Bitcoin transfers it to the next owner by digital signing it over the next owner in a Bitcoin transaction. It's like a traditional bank check. So the private key sign, the money, and you can send to everybody else. This is pretty much the scheme that is used. All the transactions are recorded. So there is a ledger. It's called the blockchain, where all the transactions are recorded. It can be, the ledger can be downloaded by everybody by using torrent. So it's true, it's very transparent. So when I see all the transaction made in the Bitcoin world, it could be done. And this aspect is used by intelligence agencies, or law enforcement agencies to track down Bitcoin. So you see, if Alice make a transaction to Bob, all the transactions are, recorded in the public ledger. There is another way, one way to, let's say, buy Bitcoin, between brackets, is the mining activity. Means you are, using your computer, a program that is using part of your processor to make calculation. Because, all the transactions need power of your processor. The same way, peer-to-peer software needs part of your disk to work. So you're giving to the community part of your resources in order to allow the system to work. In this case, it's not your disk, but it's your processor, okay? So it's the calculation power of your laptop. When of course, to, let's say, receive Bitcoin, you need to solve some calculation. It's called proof of work. When you are able to solve some calculation, cryptographic calculation, you receive in, Bitcoin, a certain amount of Bitcoin. Of course, for mining, yeah, 2 minutes, 1 minute, okay. Okay, you need a powerful computer, or you need to cluster with other guys in the pool. I will, be a bit faster. Wallet is the client. So when you use PGP, you need the client GPG. Okay, you download the software, install it, and that's what the wallet does. You can have a wallet which can be installed in your computer, or there are wallet online that can be used. They are, let's say, a bit safer. Anonymity, Bitcoin is not anonymous in its nature, so it can be tracked back to someone else, to somebody. But it's like Tor. So if you use Tor improperly, you can be tracked back. But if you use Tor properly, it's very difficult to track you down. Okay, so it depends how you use Bitcoin. For example, if you just change your signature Bitcoin, so the account where you receive money, every time you made a transaction, it's very difficult for someone to track you down. Okay, this is one trick. Okay, go. Okay, you can of course use hidden wallet or shadow wallet. If I want to, let's say, make an account Bitcoin in the normal web, they ask me my identification. Okay, so if you go to a website like Coinbase, they ask you your ID. But if you go to the Tor world, I did it yesterday. Okay, you can go to hidden wallet, just put, fake name, in this case, a George Bush, as you can see. Seagate, which is a Tor mail. And then I have my Bitcoin wallet, which I can use. This is my Bitcoin address for transaction. So to receive or to send money.
So you're a very successful criminal, right?
Yeah, obviously.
Okay, so let's finish here.
Okay.
And just to put things a little bit in context, I mean, Bitcoin is probably the future, and probably the future of crime and future of everything. But right now, the Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency economy is insignificant compared to the fiat currency economy. It's really insignificant, So, I mean, if you look at really huge money laundering operations, a few years back, the Sinaloa drug cartel, one of the biggest drug cartels in Mexico, was laundering through a single American bank called Wachovia that folded in the meantime in Wells Fargo, more than $200 billion. So we're talking like huge amounts of money. There's huge demand for money laundering all over the world because criminal groups generate a lot. I mean, big chunks of these dark economies, of these black economies. So you look at this, and then you look at Bitcoin and how, and things like Silk Road and these onion sites where there's a lot of crime and all that. Those are still small. They may increase, but that has to do with the fact that there's a finite number of Bitcoin right now in the world, and the rate of growth, although you showed there the chart growing up, it's slowing right now. So we'll see how that develops. And with this, I think I'll open up for questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Leo.
Thank you to you.
So, yes.
Okay, so I noticed a chart that showed the rise of Bitcoin from 2009 to 2015.
Yeah.
What happened in 2010? There was a sharp dip in that place. Was there any major thing that happened to cause it to drop that much? So
Bitcoin, of course, is a value that, changes its value in function of, the general demand. Obviously, there is, as Paul was right in saying that there is a limit to the Bitcoin that may be produced. But, of course, Bitcoin is just, one unit of Bitcoin. And then you have a milli Bitcoin. So you have a different scale. So when Bitcoin will be over, mil Bitcoin will start to know, more value. So it still is very expandable, the system. So it's not over. That's on the technical part. But once you have people used to use a cryptocurrency, you just may produce a new one. So these people will switch one click from one wallet to another, like dark market. You shut down Silk Road, there will be another one. What is very important is in the background. So the people get used to this logic. The people get used to this approach. The more they do, the technical part could be, there are thousands of different cryptocurrencies. So technically to do so, it's already done. You just change the approach to the cryptographic network. You make it, huge, wider, and you solve the problem.
Yeah. Question back there.
Hi, I'm Minna from Finland. Thank you. Very interesting presentation. You talked about Leo. You talked about Liberty Reserve.
Yeah.
And that it was shut down. The example you showed.
Yeah, it was shut down by a USA investigation.
But are there other similar sites around?
Yeah, there is a gold. There are many. Digital cash, as I said, it comes before Bitcoin. So, Liberty Reverse started in 2001. So it's much before Bitcoin. Bitcoin started in 2009.
So are there any special countries where they are based?
On this case, they were in Costa Rica, but of course they put their central activities in countries where let's say the Western national states cannot reach them. So in states that allow them to operate with a certain freedom of actions, but it's the same for tax haven. So same logic.
And actually, after Liberty Reserve, there was a Bitcoin exchange that was shut down, and that's Mt. Gox, which was a big one, which was actually involved in money laundering and other stuff. So, there's this clash between law enforcement, trying to to put a stop, to put a lead on crime activities that are, conducted via Bitcoin. At the same time, you have like the state of New York, which is very progressive right now, and they are trying to regulate Bitcoin. They regulated Bitcoin, and there are, in the UK, there's a panel that was assembled by the government where they called all sorts of experts to try to understand Bitcoin and to try to integrate Bitcoin into the UK economy. So there are lots of contradictory efforts there. On one hand, you have banks that are opposing Bitcoin because they lose their fees. I mean, Bitcoin means also that I'm able to send money. So I'm a worker somewhere. I'm away from home somewhere, and I need to send money home. And the bank will always take a fee, or Western Union, or MoneyGram. Bitcoin will allow me to send that money at a fraction of the cost of the bank. I mean, like really, really small amount for the transaction, which is actually the power that is consumed by the computer. So it's really, Bitcoin has lots of advantages and lots of disadvantages, and we don't really understand Bitcoin yet. I mean, nobody does, at its real extent.
I wanted to make a statement about it. It's like the Tor word. I mean, it was, concealed to protect freedom of speech, okay, and privacy. In some way, Bitcoin has been designed to protect, your liberty and your privacy in economical transactions, okay? As Tor does, Bitcoin can be used for criminal activities, but it was, designed for this activity, okay? So the scope of the software, like cryptocurrency or Tor, is to protect individuals from government. So let's say it's an anarchist approach. So it has nothing to do with organized crime.
Anarchistic, but not quite. I mean, and it's very funny, that, funny. It's interesting that the UK put together this, this panel, to discuss Bitcoin and try to integrate it. And they've kind of learned from the past. Do you know that, the first vehicles, were actually produced in the UK, not in the US, But the UK lost the race, to Ford and to others because some stupid lawmakers in the UK regulated the vehicle as it was, the automobile, like saying that it's got to have 3 persons in it. One, of course, driving, the other one watching the road, and one with a flag that would walk 50 meters in front of the car, Of course, you kill the whole car economy with that, and the Americans start. So it's the same kind of feeling with Bitcoin, actually. Lots of people feel that they might be losing ground with that. So they are. This is why they're trying, to kind of integrate this with their economies. And, any other questions? Yes.
Well, sorry, but I seem to miss the very basics. In an offline economy, the value of money partly depends on the amount of liquidity and the demand. But with the Bitcoin, how is it regulated? Is the power to emit Bitcoins monopolized like in an offline economy by central bank or whatever?
Well, I believe that the value of Bitcoin, which is increasing, but is that could be a reason why the criminal interest in Bitcoin is not still enhanced. It's because the value of Bitcoin was very flexible. So it goes up, it goes down. You don't have an idea how Bitcoin moves. On certain parameters is the volume of a transaction. So if there is a huge volume of transactions, of course the Bitcoin value is going to increase. But of course you cannot expect Bitcoin to act as a common, let's say, fiat money. Okay, so a common value. Currency.
Yeah, and just to add to this, it's much harder to produce Bitcoin than it is to produce fiat currency. Fiat currency is not tied to anything. It's not tied to gold for many, many years, for many decades. It's just the will of the government to produce it. If the Federal Reserve wants to produce more US dollars, that's fine. So it's not really tied to something that's real. Bitcoin is tied to something that's real, to those problems that are solved by the computer. This is why you can't produce as many Bitcoins as you would produce fiat currency, So, and that's a problem. And yeah. Any other questions?
I moved from Bitcoin to the other topic. I was wondering. When you received documents from sources, from official sources. I mean, how can you be sure that, how can you keep your independence? Since your investigation, I mean, are based on some data that you are not in charge. I mean, you cannot decide to which data you can analyze or not. So maybe it's a good stuff to investigate, but someone else decided.
Yeah, look, but in this case, it was not that the dogs came from one source. The thing was that they came from law enforcement, but then we went to court records which were open. And we could verify, okay, the dogs from the source, they correspond with the dogs from the court system. Then we went to the banks, actually, who were involved in the case. And I spoke to Grigoriev and the people we showed you, and they even didn't deny anything, you know. They said, yes, we did it, so what, you know, so what? And, I mean, that was not a question of trust. You know, we just did the normal reporting job. We just went and checked every single dog. And that's what Miranda did in Montenegro, that's what I did in Russia, that's what guys in Moldova did. I mean, it was like real cross-border, and everybody in each country, you know, went from a source to the public data, from public data to the source.
Okay, any other questions? If not, we'll wrap up here. Thank you very much for participating.
Too many slides.